Welcome to podcast episode number 5 in the Apprentice Spotlight Series. On today's podcast episode, I had the pleasure and privilege of speaking to Sam Rodriguez, an ironworker apprentice out of Iowa. He reached out to me via the contact page on my website, thewealthyironworker.com, which any listener that listens to the podcast episodes, this one and any other, can do. You can go to thewealthyironworker.com, fill out the contact page. I will get the email, and then we can begin to have a conversation. Now, back to today's podcast episode. Sam Rodriguez, he tells us his story. He talks about how he felt semi-directionless until he got into the trades and how it has been greatly advantageous for his life and has definitely helped him out. And we need to get the word out to a lot more people. Registered apprenticeship programs are the gold standard, and they're one of the best kept secrets. They should not be kept secret, though. We should talk. We should herald them. We should hold them up. We should highlight the significant number of benefits that come about because of them. So let's join in our conversation with Sam, and he can tell us his story. I really appreciate your willingness to come on a second time because of hardware issues, but it is what it is. So, Samuel, I really appreciate your time, and we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to try not to take up as much of your time as I did last time. So
there's no problem.
So we're going to go back to the questionnaire that I sent you, and I'm just going to ask you the questions kind of as the conversation kind of gears towards it. But I guess we'll just start off by, you can talk about a little bit about yourself, some of the background, kind of growing up. Did you grow up? And the main premise of this is to just ascertain if you had a trades kind of background or not. You might have a family that has nothing to do with it, or they might have been anti-trade, or it might be the opposite, right? You might have just a complete long lineage of it. So that's the basic premise of it. But go ahead, man. Just take it away and talk us through it all.
So my name is Sammy Rodriguez. I just started my second year over here in Local 89 for Union Ironworkers. And I'm from Muscatine, Iowa, and growing up, there wasn't much. There weren't many buildings going up. There, not really many bridges or anything like that being put into place. So in terms of the trades, I didn't really know anything about them. My dad was a non-union electrician, and my experience with that is that he was just miserable. And growing up, you always hear the whole, I want you to do. And then his words, I want you to do better than I did growing up. And, so that way I don't have to work as hard. And I just think it's funny because now I'm probably working harder than he ever did his entire life, considering I'm an ironworker. But as far as growing up in with the trades, he was always in a factory. So I never really saw what he did. He just always came home all dirty and gross. My mom is a direct support professional. She still is to this day, providing services for people with mental disabilities. So she wasn't entirely anti-trade, but she also didn't push college on me growing up. I always knew school was important, and I never really knew exactly what I wanted to do after high school. But she pretty much told me either, you go construction or you go and get your gen eds, so that way you have something to fall back on. And at the time I didn't, I was like, I'm just going to go get my gen eds. I don't want to do construction. I didn't want to beat my body down for my entire life for a paycheck. So I tried the school thing. I actually tried twice. When I was 18, I went to community college, Flunked out of that, and then gave it a couple years break. Moved to the Quad Cities, where local 111 is located. And I tried to go to school again, and then flunked out again. So I was just kind of, uncertain of what I wanted to do. At the time, I was also a direct support professional. I was working as well, so while also going to school. So I just thought I'd kind of ride that wave for a little while and just kind of see where life took me. And it wasn't bad. It was stable, paid the bills and everything. But, growing up, I didn't have a plan for anything, especially, after 18. When I was in high school, they didn't really push college, or they didn't push, the trades at all. We had a shop class and we had a welding class. And those were my two best classes that I did, but the teachers, the instructors, they didn't really, say, go to kids and say, hey, I think you have a future in this. Have you looked at doing this, or have you looked at doing that? And if they did, it was, the community college has classes for this. It wasn't, go look at trade unions, don't go look at trade schools, none of that. It was very school, like college driven. I don't know if they got like a kickback on it or something, but everything was always towards the schools. And we would have these reviews with our counselors, and it was always, what profession do you want to go to, or what are you interested in terms of like book work, I guess. And they would push you to 3 schools: University of Iowa in Iowa City, Iowa State in Ames, or UNI, which I think is in Cedar Falls. I think. I'm not completely sure, but it was usually those 3. And, you kind of just picked one, and they would kind of try to tell you what you needed to do to kind of make your way that direction. And yeah, it just didn't really pan out for me. I tried the school thing. It just didn't work. And, I had a good childhood, and it's just in Muscatine. It's like, it's a smaller city. It's, maybe hovers around 24,000 mark per population. There's Heinz, there's GPC, there's Han, a lot of manufacturing stuff. So a lot of factories and, assembly line stuff. And if you're not in that area, you're in the offices kind of, doing white collar stuff. The only construction you really saw was, road construction, and everybody hated that. So, there wasn't much exposure to the trades living there. You didn't hear anything about trade unions, because I don't think there's any unions close to Muscatine in general. And if there is, I have no idea about them. You just didn't hear about them. A lot of the people that I grew up with, they went into like roofing. I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do roofing. Didn't want to do road construction. So, I just kind of hovered back between, Muscatine and the Quad Cities for a couple of years. And, life happened. I ended up over here in Cedar Rapids because I was a custodian for the Cedar Rapids School District, which was, pretty decent. They have a retirement plan, and I think you start out like $20 an hour, and it wasn't a bad gig. And they liked me there, and I liked it too. But they were going to be closing that school down that I was at, and I was kind of in the maintenance area when I got put up into the position of building engineer for that school. So you're kind of just like daytime maintenance when you're in that position. They were erecting the school across the street that was going to be taking the place of the one that I was working at. And I kind of saw how they would build the skeleton. I don't know if it was millwrights or ironworkers or I think it was all trades. All trades were there. I just don't know necessarily who specifically. But I kind of saw them building things. And I thought it would be cool to build things instead of just fix things that little kids broke for a living. So, I started seeing all these companies and all these, all these company trucks and these construction workers. And I thought it was pretty cool. And long story short, I went to every single union hall in the area, and they either weren't taking applications or, weren't really entertaining the idea of like apprentices at the time, or they said they were, but they couldn't give me an exact answer on when those things were going to start. And when you're, especially in this economy, you can't really go too long without a job before you start hitting, some maybe financial difficulties or something like that. I walked into the Ironworkers Hall, and they sent me to work the very next day. Like my BA looked at me. He's like, I asked for some information, and he said, why are you looking for a job? And I was like, hey, yeah, kind of. His guys got real big. He's like, when can you start? I was, and this is on a Tuesday, and I'm thinking, maybe next Monday or something. And give me a little bit of time to prepare. And I was like, whenever. He's like, what about tomorrow? I'm like, sure. I was like, why not? Sure. And they gave me a loaner tool belt with a rod. It was a rod buster setup because it was a rod job building caissons. And the very next day, I got my dispatch to go to, I believe it was Williamsburg, to build caissons with this family company. It's a family of rod busters. So did that for about a month. That job finished, laid me off, and then I went back to the hall. And like 2 days later, I got set up with the company I'm still with to this day. So I've technically been with them for over a year now, still rod busting.
No, it's fantastic, actually. So that answers the question also, right, of how long you've been in, because you've been, a little over a year. So you start your second year. And I remember this from our previous conversation, but there's a couple of things that I'm going to circle back to that you made a comment about, in the beginning. And the first one was like what your dad had said. Well, I want better for you. I distinctly remember this. I was doing some OSHA training. I was getting we call it OSHA 500, which allows us then to turn around and be able to teach 10-hour and 30 hours OSHA classes to apprentices or other journeymen for upgrading or whatever. And I distinctly remember a guy out of New York, and he was there, and this is probably 2008 timeframe, might even been before then. And he said, we always talk about wanting better for our kids. And he said, but this has not been bad. And he was referring to the career that he has made. And he was probably older 50s 20 years ago. And so he was referencing then his career as an ironworker, as a union tradesman. And it got me thinking then, all the way back then, that people in the trades themselves sometimes denigrate and degrade the trade. And the very same trade that puts food on the table, that puts clothes on their kids' back and a roof over their head. As if to say oftentimes that there's something wrong with just good, honest, hard work, working with your hands, right? Something that's tangible. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't promote, whatever career we're in, whether you're an iron worker or a pipe fitter or electrician, whatever. When we don't promote our trade with enthusiasm that it has provided for me and my family, like for me, right? My wife's a stay-at-home mom, and I cherish that fact, right? She gets to spend as much time as she wants to with our kids, and take impromptu camping trips and stuff like that. And that has been solely due to the trade that we're in, and the trade that I have, been, quite frankly, has provided me with a level of success, and able to provide for my family. And so that stuck out to me when your dad said that, because I know that I've heard that over and over and over again. I heard it from so many people when I was younger that would tell me the same thing. And even today, right, I will occasionally hear somebody who's in the trade providing for their family will say the very same thing. You don't want to, I want better for my kid. Like, well, what is wrong with what we're doing? What's wrong with the trade that you're in? Has it been providing for you? And quite frankly, what it really tells me is that there's a lot of people, tradesmen included, who don't understand just how good it can be, right? How good a career in the trades actually turns out to be, because you always think the grass is greener somewhere else. when in reality, there's a lot of people who the grass isn't so green. Just because you're not getting dirty or you're not doing physical labor, that person could be in a dead end job that they absolutely hate. And then on top of that, they're not physical in their job. And so they're declining in their physical health too. And so that was point number one that I want to touch on. Number two, you made a comment about how adults that have influence in your life made comments just about the 3 schools that they would try to funnel you to, and you were talking about kickbacks. Now that possibly could be. I don't know. But one thing that I have found over and over and over again is that there's this thought process that I believe comes to mind, and it's that this is the path that I took. Meaning, I graduated high school, I went to college, I got a 4-year degree. For most of them, they probably end up having to get their master's. And then because this is the route that I took, my mind says, well, this is the route that everyone needs to take. And this has been the narrative then that has been woven through decades, quite frankly. And it's unfortunate because guidance counselors in particular, guidance counselor, they're supposed to provide guidance and counsel. And yet what they end up doing is offering empty platitudes and just the same old of, well, you got to go to college to get a good job. And it's not true. And I'm inclined to believe that the only significant reason why the enrollment numbers are not as robust as they have been is because the cracks in the narrative that you have to go to college to get a good job are too big to ignore now. Hey, look, I'm left with $50,000 or $80,000 in debt, and I'm going to have to pay this back for 25 years or whatever. And so there very well could be some people, but it just seems that most people that reside in a position of influence, like, it's so easy to just go, all right, Samuel, I'm going to take you off of this K-12 conveyor belt of school and place you on this conveyor belt that'll take you. It seems easy, right? It's an easy thing to tell you, a young, impressionable individual, this is the only pathway for you, when instead what we ought to be doing with a lot of young people is helping them navigate through where's the opportunity at instead. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality. So I'm glad you got off of that conveyor belt, because there's nothing wrong with higher education. There's something wrong with you have to go to college to get a good job. That's a problem. And so those are 2 points that just kind of jumped out. I was writing notes while you were talking, and those are 2 things that just kind of jumped at me while we were sitting here having that conversation. So a year or so in the rod patch as an iron worker, not a lot of people. I mean, I've been around 23 years now. There are very few iron workers that I'm aware of that are so happy to be in the rod patch or talk positively about it. They just, I don't like doing it, for whatever reason. But what's that experience been like for you? Like, it's been what you've been doing. So, and I'll tell you this, we visit Iowa probably, at least one time a year, maybe twice, and there's concrete everywhere, right? And you got a deep frost line, so you guys have reinforcing everywhere. So I know that, that's probably a significant portion of what you guys do, but what's it been like for you?
It's been very positive. I think especially when you first start out, I don't want to say luck of the draw when it comes to who you're working with, but who you're working with really can dictate your experience in any line of work, but especially with, construction. And I landed with a good group of guys. The first crew that I was with, it was that family company. And, just being in a year now, you can kind of look at somebody and just kind of think, oh yeah, they're built for this or they're not. And everybody that, I've come in contact with on the job sites and with the different crews, they've always kind of, it's just been positive. They don't give me too much crap. We throw jabs at each other every now and then just to have the day go by. But it's been, one of the first things, for example, that the foreman and the owner of the company said to me, he's like, "How old are you?" It was later on in the week, and we didn't really talk too much about personal life or anything like that. But he's like, "How old are you?" Like, at the time I was 27. I was like, "I'm 27," and he's all like, "You're gonna do just fine." He's like, "You're gonna do pretty well," and he's like, "Especially if you're doing something like this." He's like, "Some guys aren't made for it, and some guys would be better off doing some other part of the trade." He's like, "But if you can bust rods, then you'll never be out of a job." And, it felt good to hear that because, you don't really, I mean, I don't get too much praise. It's kind of show up and do your job. That's kind of how it is. So for the longest time, I was kind of thinking like, man, am I doing good? Is it, what can I be doing better? Am I making any progress? It was kind of hard to gauge that, but like the guys that you work with, giving you, saying good job, or just, saying, keep up the good work. That's been helpful for me. I want to say the first 6 months were the hardest, physically, mentally. Physically, because your body's just not used to using the muscles that you have to use in order to just tie rebar.
Oh, yeah.
But then packing the rebar is a whole different beast as well, especially in the summer. Like, I remember we were at a site where we didn't have a crane, and we were packing like these 30-foot number 9s, and I forgot that rebar was steel, and I forgot that in 99-degree heat, steel heats up. And I had rolled my sleeves up all the way up here because it was hot. And then, I start packing rebar, and like 10 minutes later, I feel like I have this, like my skin's melting off. Like, it just was killing me. And, it was just because the bar was hot. And, it's stuff like that where, you kind of figure out what you're made of pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's been good. The guys that I work with are hard dudes. There's some old timers that are close into retirement, but I've worked a lot around them, and I think I'm learning how to do things the correct way. There's a right way and a wrong way, easy way and a hard way to do things, and they've done pretty good at teaching me how to do things the quote, however easy it can be in rebar. When things start to get really hard, it's usually because somebody's what we call trying to reinvent the wheel. Like there's grade beams, there's columns, there's walls, and there's a way to build them. And it's like putting together a big, complex, heavy jigsaw puzzle. And that's kind of the fun of it. And, rebar can be really hard if you make it harder on yourself. Like, and I've seen guys do it. It's like, why, like, it's hard to explain because it's really just experience based. I can say how hard it is, and I can say how easy or difficult things are, but you really don't know until you go do it for a little while. We're a mixed local, so there's structural, industrial, and reinforcing, and ornamental, and that stuff. So not everybody's required to do rebar. I just happen to be one of the ones that, for lack of a better term, I'm a good hand. So they, try to keep me and keep me busy, keep me working. And I can't complain. All around the country, for a while, work was pretty steady, but I feel like things are starting to slow down a little bit because there's always people looking for work. And, I just think to myself, like, at least I don't have to, look for work. Like, we just finished up a parking ramp, but in November, we got one coming up. Right now, we got a flood wall going. And then next year, there's another parking ramp. So, that's work. And as an apprentice, you need hours. Yep. Certain hours for work, certain hours for class. If you don't have those, there's a chance you couldn't, you might not turn out at the end of 3 years. So there's guys, like you said, there's guys that don't ever want to touch it. They never will. They don't want to. They'd rather starve. And, that's fine. But, I'm glad that I'm in the position that I'm in and learning from the guys that I'm learning from, because there's some really good, smart dudes that have been doing it for their entire career. Unfortunately, they're going to be phasing out soon because of retirement. So there's going to be that gap in experience. And one of my foremen always tells me, I always say he makes me read the prints against my will. But we'll be up there on the deck and be like, Sam, come here. I'll go over there, and he'll He's like, Sam, come here. He's like, take a look. He's like, this is what we're doing. Here's where we're at. I need you to go get these, rig them up, fly them up. He's like, and then start laying them out here and all this stuff. And he's like, and then I'm like, okay, I'll go do that. And he'll say something along the lines of, he's like, I need you to start understanding these prints. He's like, because what if I'm not here one day or I die? He's like, someone needs to take my place. And I'm like, all right. It's overall been positive. The winters suck. I will say that. This past winter, there was one period of time where I was really sitting there thinking like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm, cut out for this. And it had nothing to do with rebar, really, not really placing anything, not tying nothing, not packing nothing. We had a really bad snowstorm and we went out there and I was, I'm an apprentice. So Sam, go shovel out all that rebar from the snow. Like, all right, get a shovel. It's 5 degrees, 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm out there shoveling all this snow and I get tons of rebar uncovered from the snow. We leave for the day. And then that night, it snows like 5 feet. So everything I had just shoveled just got covered up again. And it was cold. And it's just, it was just, I would say the first winter was hard. The first winter really kind of, just every day I would text my girlfriend and I'm like, rest of my life. This is going to be the rest of my life. And, but it's been overall it's been positive. And I'm glad I'm in, like I said, in the position that I'm in.
Well, so what would you say is the average age of, or how many guys you got working around you, and how many of them are, is it half the crew? Is it a quarter of the crew? What's your what does it look like that are going to retire soon?
So with the crew that I'm with, it's just the one, but it's my foreman, we call him Dog. He doesn't even know why they call him Dog. I don't know why they call him Dog, but we just call him Dog. And he's like, I think he's 52. So I think he said another year or two, and he's going to be retiring. But he's from a group of rod busters that was from this company called Hawkeye. And all I hear is stories about Hawkeye, this company called Hawkeye Steel, Hawkeye Rebar. I don't know what they were. Hawkeye Reinforcing, something Hawkeye. Is him, the super at the company, was also in that same group. This retiree that kind of comes back and works for beer money, he calls it. He's like 63, but he was part of that group. The first contractor I worked with that started his own company, he was from that group. So it's like this core group of like rod busters that just were no BS and knew how to get stuff done. And, they just do stuff the old fashioned way. They just do stuff, and some might call it the hard way, but efficient. They're efficient. And, he's going to be, just retiring soon. And he's kind of teaching me as much as he can whenever I'm working with him. Right now, he's over there in Nebraska. They're also putting up a parking ramp. Same company, just, they have him over there. And I would say he's the only one that's pretty close. The rest of the crew, the guys with experience, mid 30s, early 40s, I would say are the next oldest after him. So they got, quite a few number of years left. And then we got boomers from, 846, 847 hands, that Rod Buster International locals. And those guys are pretty young. I would say, I'm turning 29 this year. Am I turning? Yeah, I'm turning 29 this year. I lose track. But I'm old. I'm older than most of them. And, they've been doing it for like 5-6 years since they were like 18 years old. So yeah, it's, I'm closer to, I'm like right in the middle. Really, honestly, I'm right in the middle. But, those 846, 847 guys, they don't really stick around too long. They stick around as long as their work, but as long as when the work dries up, they take off back down to Texas, over there to Florida, wherever there's work. So I would say with the company, there's like a core group of guys that, kind of ranges between the ages of 25 to maybe like 42, 43.
I would say your company then is an anomaly. They're in actually a pretty good picture, primarily because, that whole thing, like you got to go to college, you got to go job. What it has really done is it's basically discouraged recruitment for the trades. And so when I look around, and I've been around for a while now, and I'll see people who are 55 plus, I'll say 50, I'll be generous, 50 plus, and then I'll say 30 or below. You do have some who are in the 30s and the 40s. I'm one of them, but we're a rarity. And that's for one of the many reasons why is primarily because a lot of the millennials bit down hard. They were the first generation to really bite down hard on you got to go to college to get a good job. And it's really showing itself now because as the latter half of the baby boomers retire, or in the next 5, I'll even give them 10 years. But as they begin to retire, you're not seeing as many people who are early to mid 40s right now. You're seeing people who are in their 30s. Now, it's good that they're getting the experience in, right? But what happens is that we have an age gap, and we really shouldn't have that. We also have a skills gap because you don't have the time in the trade with those older folks who are on their way out and are retiring. Now, that's where you're also privileged because you're talking about working with some real good and some seasoned hands who are passing down what we'll say is generational knowledge. And it's unfortunate, but not everybody has that. They don't have the same, let's say, opportunity to learn from some of them older folks. It may be because they've already retired in whatever area of the country or wherever they might be working at. But just as likely is that a lot of older people, when they get to a certain age, they don't want to mentor, which is the next question and the next discussion point for you and I. And you've already talked about it to a degree where your foreman is, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it's mentoring, right? It's mentoring at its finest. He's telling you, hey, look, let me show you this. Let me look at this. But what I find is that a lot of older people, instead of attempting to gauge and try and understand what you know, and just as important, what you don't know, and then try to build that skills gap up, because that's what on-the-job training is. There are so many of those people, as well as companies in general, who would say things like, well, he don't know anything. I don't have time to teach him. And there are those of us who are out here going, no, you got it incorrect. You cannot afford to not. If they don't learn, you will not have the next generation coming in to replace the ones who are retiring. It's going to take a level of intentionality on the part of older journeymen to mentor younger people coming in, and intentionality on contractors' part into hiring apprentices in the first place and fostering an environment where mentoring is not just a status quo thing. It's actually heavily encouraged. And it sounds to me like, in our discussion, that you're in the latter, that you have a contractor that employs journeyman ironworkers who are taking the lead on, mentoring you about, what, like, you just don't know what you don't know. And so they're taking the lead on teaching you and showing you, here, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. And then you're being a sponge. Is that a correct assessment on my part?
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so. It was kind of hard. I wouldn't say to like break down my foreman to like teach me anything, because I've seen instances where like there are apprentices and guys that they do want to learn. And I mean, I haven't seen it where I work, but I've seen it at other places. And like you said, those journeymen or those the foremen or the company, they just don't want to teach. Like they just go pick up trash, go do this, go do that, let the journeyman do the work. And I didn't have to break anybody down and beg and plead. But, one of the first, there was a week where that foreman I was talking about, Dog, I worked with him for about there was a week or two where it was just him and I at that, when we're doing like the very beginning of that parking ramp kind of that we were just finishing up now. And one of the first things he told me, and I don't know, I'm sure he's seen apprentices come and go many, many times. And he said, he's like, he pretty much told me, leave him alone. And if I have any questions, maybe one of the other apprentices or the other journeymen can, show me a thing or two. Because he's got foreman stuff to do. He's got layout and he has to make sure things are running smoothly. And I was like, yeah, sure, fine, I get it. And I think once you realize that, I don't know. I don't know how to say this without, sounding like I'm, full of myself. But like once he realized I could do it, and once I realized, he didn't have to sit there and explain things 10 times for me to get it, he was more willing to, show me things and, show me little tricks, give me a hand on, if I had any questions, and even just sending me off to do, to like build a column or a little bit of slab on grade over there or something like that. I would say it's almost like having to like earn trust a little bit because it wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't always like this or like it in the beginning. Like I said, I've seen apprentices come and go, and I'm sure he's seen many, many, many apprentices come and go. So I can kind of see how some people don't want to, put all this time and effort into teaching somebody if they're just going to phase out. But, I think I show a willingness to learn. Like I show a willingness to, apply the things that I'm told. So I think that goes a long way as well. You kind of have to meet these people and these individuals in the middle with this type of stuff. You could have a journeyman or a foreman that, want to teach you everything, but I'm sure there have been some apprentices that just don't want to hear it. They just kind of want to show up and do nothing. And, you get enough of those types of apprentices or workers in general, and you just, I guess, maybe just stop wanting to, take the time to help. So, I try my best to be like a sponge and try to, learn and just keep an eye. And even not from him, not just from him in general, but like everybody I work with. Like if I'm, walking down and doing something, have to go down to the ground to rig something up and fly it, I'm like looking around and making sure, I know what's going on. And like if there's a part of like on the deck or, with the beams that I don't really understand why we're doing that or what to do in the next step, just take a few seconds and kind of look to see what the journeymen are doing and, just watch what they're doing. And they're doing it for a reason. That's one thing that I was also told is like, if you don't know what to do, watch me. Not me, but Foreman said, if you don't know what to do, watch me because there's a reason I'm doing it. And, that went a long way. And I just think, having the willingness to learn goes a long way as well.
Yeah. You know what? It's a really tough thing. First off, the reason that I am so adamant, if you will, about the apprentice spotlights are, number one, I don't know of anybody else that does them. And number two, I'm fully and well aware that, obviously the youth and the apprentices in general are going to be the future. So we don't sell that enough. I've always said this, the registered apprenticeship program model, which is what you're a part of, is the gold standard. It's the best kept secret, and it shouldn't be. So we should promote that. However, I'm also fully well aware that the first year is the toughest, right? Because you're coming in, no one's told you anything different. No one's telling you anything. You've got some people who just look at you as if you're just passing through. You're not going to come through and you're not going to stay. They don't, you got to prove your merit, if you will, before I'm going to expend any real energy, kind of, training you up or teaching you or passing on generational knowledge, etc. And you're just confused and you don't know anything. You're probably the easy target to catch flack on the job. I mean, I remember what it was like, right? I remember what it's like maybe having a fresh pair of eyes, but no one pays any attention to you because you're so I understand all of that. So obviously the encouragement, right, to you is, and I've said this before, when I said it to Emily in my previous Apprentice Spotlight, I said to her at the very end of the podcast episode, which is if you start to work around other apprentices, and especially once you are a journeyman, remember what it's like as a first year, as a second year, as an apprentice who is paid less attention to, and be sure to stand in the gap, as it were, to advocate that, yeah, we need to do some more mentoring, and I will, be the tip of the spear. I'll start mentoring first before, I'm expecting some other people to mentor or whatever. So keep that in mind, right? As you progress through your career, that that if you want to see a change, I mean, it sounds like a broken cliche, but if you want to see a change, you set the pace first, right?
Mm.
You see a need, fill a need, kind of thing, because it is, we are not, from my perspective and from what I can see, I don't think the construction industry as a whole has really done anything different to do any significant recruiting in the past 20 years. I think one of the major reasons why we have received as much interest as possible, to the degree that we have, is because the narratives that you got to go to college are starting to just crumble. And because that's the case, people are looking around going, well, I don't want to do that. I didn't really care for school in the first place. Now, where can I go? It's nothing to do with what the trades have might have been proactive in trying to recruit people. And quite frankly, even though the construction industry is the largest industry in the world, just in the United States alone, what was it, Mr. Beast, who had a tweet beginning of the year that said, in the past 3 years alone, just 3 years, and just YouTube, they had paid out over $70 billion in ad revenue to content creators. That's just in 3 years, and that's just on YouTube. So that whole entire industry has basically become a competitor. People see that, I don't want to say easy out, but that's another avenue that people at the construction industry has to compete with. So you have all these additional, let's say, avenues that are looking for people to employ, etc. And then here we are, the construction industry, which is rough and it's tough, and we're trying to get apprentices in, and they're lost on the job, and it's difficult. And journeymen and foremen are like, yeah, right. Let's see if this kid makes it the first, 6 months first, and this and that, and see if he can stomach it. And so it's like, it just feels like, in a lot of ways, as a first year apprentice, that if you don't have a good mentor, or you're not a willing sponge, it feels like the world is against you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But you made a comment, and it was, I'm willing to learn. And I think the term that I would prefer to use is humility. You're coming into this trade, you don't know anything, and you know that you don't know anything, or that you know relatively little when it comes to this trade. And so you're approaching this not with a pride perspective, like, I know what I'm doing, I know this, or I'm faking it. You're coming in like, I just want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Can I observe? Can I watch someone do something? Can you show me how to do this? And those are all hallmarks of humility. And it's very hard to come by in the trades, because the trades, for whatever reason, seem to attract arrogant, prideful people. But man, when you got humility, and you definitely need it as an apprentice, it'll serve you it'll serve you in the entirety of your apprenticeship. As a matter of fact, if you're the last one to go to break and the first one to come back, and you're checking the machines, and you're making sure everybody's got what they need, and you're doing your job to the best of your ability, and the foreman's taking you up, let me show you these drawings, so that you can understand what we got going on, like that kind of stuff right there. Like I've always said, when I was running work, I would take 5 apprentices that didn't know anything over 2 journeymen that had a bad attitude every day of the week. And so you're absolutely right. Being an apprentice can be tough, especially the first year. It's really hard. But for those of you who are interested in the trade, might be listening to this or watching this conversation, depending on how you consume your podcast content, the advice that I would give is the same thing I'm going to tell Samuel, right? Is that just keep in mind that this is not like a short-term job. You're talking about a complete career build here. And it's going, anytime you're doing anything new or anytime you're trying to grow, guess what? You're going to do uncomfortable things. You don't need to be afraid of it. You need to look headfirst into it and march forward and just learn and do what you got to do. So I appreciate you, kind of talking about that, because I think it brings up some really good points that, we need to bring people in, but we also got to deal with the fact that it is tough, right? Your first year, I can remember my first year. It was tough. It was so tough. And I can remember, all the yelling or, the confusion, like what's going on here? I just don't know.
Yeah.
And navigating through that, man, it can be tough, man. It can be tough. So, so aside from the winter, because I know the winter has nothing to do with our trade. It has to do with where you're at, right?
Yeah.
But aside from the trade, right? Aside from that, what is I'm going to say, the least favorite thing, at least in the short time that you've been in the trade? What's the least favorite thing to you?
Trying to think. I try to be so growing up, I was a very just negative person, and I looked at the the bad side of everything first. As I've gotten older, I've kind of I've tried my absolute hardest to make the switch and look at all the positives. So, and the thing I do most, the thing I do every day is work. So I always just try to look for the positives. It's kind of hard to look for I could sit in here and say, oh, the negatives, packing rebar sucks. It's hot. Your hands hurt, cramp up, your hands start to seize, but it's just part of the job, man. You get over it.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of hard for me to find something negative when I don't absolutely hate it. like there's guys out there that absolutely just hate it and they want nothing to do with it. So, it's really easy to pick out the negatives in it, but it's so hard for me. I would say the work itself, I don't really see any, a worst part really. The situations though that arise with just, I guess, being on a job site and construction in general is, there's trade wars is like a real thing. Like there are carpenters that hate ironworkers. There are ironworkers that hate carpenters. There's everybody that hates laborers. Nobody likes the electricians. It's just, and when you have all these guys on a site for so long together, you're not gonna get along with your best friends every day, let alone dudes that you have no idea who they are, where they're from, or or anything. It's so I would say there's been times on the site where there have been situations that have come up where nobody's getting along that day. Everyone's fighting over the crane time. We got to set these beams. The carpenters want to set this beam. Well, when it takes them 15 minutes to set it, we want to set these, grade beams in these beam pockets. We already have it rigged up, but they want, they called the crane first. So it's like, I try to keep the peace with everybody on site. Everybody on site. Then that's not my job. I'm an iron worker and my priority is to do iron work and, get my job done. But I would say what I just like the most is when there's such a, things get so chaotic that nobody wants to work together. We're all working on a project, a parking ramp or a high rise. We don't have high rises here in Iowa, but big projects that require cooperation from the bottom to the top. And there's just, things that happen that, might rub people the wrong way. And next thing you know, they just don't want to help you out. There's been times where, we'll be unloading a rebar truck and, as it goes, when the truck's there, truck's priority. We get the crane. That's our crane for the time being until we get this truck unloaded. Well, there'll be times where it's the carpenters need something sent up from the ground to the top. It's one pick. It's real quick. And, we might have to rig up some rebar real quick. It might take a few minutes. So I'm sure, I'll hand the crane over. They get their one pick. I get it back. We start, unloading again. And that's what I mean by keeping the peace. I'd rather do that than tell them, well, screw off. We got the crane. worry about it later. Like it's, that's not our problem. I know 99% of tradesmen would do that, but sometimes, I feel like that's what you got to do to keep things moving. Like like I said, there's been times where nobody's in agreement with, us, like a schedule or, you know, on how to keep things moving. And I just try to make sure that things keep moving. Like I said, it's not really my responsibility as an apprentice. I'm supposed to just do what I'm told. But I would say that's my least favorite part is when, you know, the foremans are fighting over fighting over the radio because someone thinks they deserve the crane right now while the other guys have it, but they're taking their sweet time, and nobody there's no give and take. I feel like there needs to be a little give and take when it comes to working together with people. And when there's none of that, I think that's when some problems can arise. And that's what I like dealing with the least, because it just puts a damper on everybody's mood. And yeah, it just sucks. It just sucks. I like I said, I understand that, there's trade wars and pride in the specific trade that you have. But when that comes, when that interferes with the task at hand, then I think something needs to be done in that moment just to figure it out. Like, we're all grown men or women. Like, we should be able to figure it out.
I would say that you're wise beyond your years with your approach. That's a leadership. That's one of the tenets of leadership, right? It doesn't always have to be my way. I'm looking to I want to scratch. It's the old adage, right? I'm gonna scratch your back, you scratch mine, kind of stuff. I've had contractors ask me like, "Hey, can we borrow your torch, for the day?" Sure, I'm not using it here because I know that there's going to come a day when I need something and they've got it, and I'm going to say, "Hey, can I borrow that?" And they're going to remember if I was a jerk and I was not willing to some give and take, as you say, they're going to give like for like, right? No, you're okay. But I'm in a bind here and I need that. Can I have that, please? Yeah. Here you go, bud. That kind of thing. And that's always been one of the ways that I've tried to approach running jobs and whatnot. And I would tell you today that you've got a pretty bright future ahead of you if that's your perspective. That's a very rare thing, I think, especially in somebody who is young and doesn't have that responsibility, right? There's a lot of people who are not willing to embrace any level of responsibility at all, journeyman included. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a lot of journeymen who do not want any level of responsibility at all. So when you start talking about, as an apprentice, I'm trying to keep the peace, I want to make things run smoothly, that gives me hope, right? That not only do I see somebody who's young and is, let's say, taking the bull by the horns, if you will, and just saying, I'm going to get this done, but I'm willing to bet that, in the years to come, you're also going to be mentoring. And I bet that you will probably, when you start working around other apprentices, you'll probably be mentoring them as well. And we have and I'll say this too, we have a serious problem. And I'm not speaking, I could talk about the building trades in general. And it's certainly applicable to the pipe fitters, to the laborers, to the electricians, whatever. But we have internally, for sure, as ironworkers, we have a serious problem with mentoring. We don't do enough of it. That's what I mean, is that we don't do nowhere near enough mentoring. Mark Breslin, in his book, The 5-Minute Foreman, talks about that. How, when he was in a room talking to construction professionals and asked them, hey, how many of you can look back at your career and can recognize that you were mentored at one time or another? And about 70 to 75% of the hands, I believe the book says, threw their hand up in the air. And then he says, well, okay, that's great. Now, how many of you are actively mentoring? And about 30% of the hands go up. And that's a problem. And I'll hear older folks that, these young people don't want to work, or, they just don't have a work ethic or whatever. And I'm like, they're on the job. They clearly are working, and you're the more mature person, or at least you're supposed to be, and you probably claim that you are. So if that's the case, then you need to be the more mature person and find a way to connect with people. And I your local has got a great asset as far as I'm concerned with you, because your perspective of just trying to, let's just, because there's going to come a time when you need something from one of those other crafts, and they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that. And just as important is other people who follow right along with you. They're going to see the way that you approach things, and they're going to take a page out of your book. So kudos to you. That's very commendable, by the way. So we're kind of winding down this podcast. And again, I want to say thanks for, coming in here, but these are one of the last, I'm going to ask two more questions and then we'll wrap this thing up. Number one, how has being in this trade affected your life? I know it's going to be positive, but I just, from your mouth to the listener's ears, take it away.
I would say that it's so hard because you wake up and you go to work, and that's, for me, that's what it is. For many people, that's what it is. You just wake up, you go do your job. But there's so much, especially being in a union trade, that happens outside of just going to work. It's, people really need to think about, because I wake up and I go to work, what do I get out of that besides just a paycheck? And before, I worked as a direct support professional, and it was a very, humbling and very rewarding job. But because of the nature of the actual work, it didn't pay too much, but I was insured. Fast forward to when I was a custodian, I, paid a little bit better, but, you're insured and all this other stuff, but that comes out of your check. Now, fast forward to being in a union trade. You wake up every day, you go to work, you make good money. And on top of the good money you're making, you're also getting, benefits and, a total package outside of just your hourly wage, on top of your hourly wage, that it comes at no cost to you in the form of, vacation and insurance and stuff like that, which many people just take for granted. Or, I can't remember, between the time that you and I first did the first podcast and now, you can see here, it's kind of hard to see, but I got cut by a post-tension cable, and for the whole year, nothing happened. I was totally fine. Everything's great. In a split second, I make a decision that cuts my arm open, and I need 14 stitches. Now, I haven't paid a single cent for that. You know what I mean? I'm insured, and had I not been insured, this whole thing probably would have been a nightmare. And I would say that's probably the biggest thing for me. The biggest positive is all of that I just discussed. It equals out to, stability and security. Growing up, I kind of, from 18 years, the past 10 years, I would say, the past 10 years, everything was kind of hectic and nothing was for certain. And there was no real like stability. Yeah, I was insured. I mean, I had healthcare and all that stuff, but like financially, I wouldn't say I was financially stable and secure, mainly because my spending habits weren't the best and I was kind of immature in that sense. But, I wasn't really making too much money. Now I'm making a good amount of money I can support, me, my girlfriend, and our 4 cats,
4 cats.
Like, I don't got no kids. I got 4 cats, man. And, they're still expensive, cat litter and food and all that stuff. So, I need money for that. And, I make enough to where, we can live comfortably. And my girlfriend has a job too. She's a tattoo artist. She makes good money. So I would say it's, provided, stability, security, which in return leads to just overall just happiness. You can have all your ducks in a row for the most part, but if you're financially unstable or something like that, your life can be a mess, man. Like, it's just, you don't feel good. You're always wondering about the next day, what's going to happen when this bill comes, and I don't necessarily have to worry about that too much. And I'm glad for that. On top of all that, the actual work itself, I'm only on my second year, and I got the rest of my life. to do this, to do and learn this trade. When I was a custodian, in 6 months, I plateaued. I was already at the highest level that you could be in terms of position. And I didn't want to be a lifer doing that. And, some people did, there's a lot of old timers in that line of work too. They weren't miserable, but they'd been doing it for 20 years. And I knew I didn't want to do that. It was a good placeholder for the time, but I didn't want to, just be stuck at a dead end, job like that. Some people, yeah, but for me, no. So it's overall been very positive, and I'm thankful that I get to to make money, to learn, no debt. I'm turning 29 years old, and I have no debt.
Listen, dude, that right there, I will never forget. This was probably about 10 years ago, I guess. There was an apprentice. He has gone into the Marine Corps now. Actually, he's an officer. But I will never forget when he was sitting in the first year apprenticeship class, and he said to everybody around him that he owed $80,000 of tuition debt.
Oh my God.
And there he was, sitting in the same classroom with everybody else with an albatross around his neck that weighed $80,000 worth. And I thought, I'll never forget this, because here is a real life example of somebody who he wanted to play baseball. He was a great guy. He was super smart too. I loved working with him. Would pick things up. He'd ask the right questions. But he was stuck with $80,000. And one of the primary reasons that he had gone down that path is, well, this is how we treat everybody coming out of school. So the idea then that you don't have any debt is fantastic. The other point that I want to touch on that you said, the benefits. After 20 some years, the number of people that I have to make sure that I clarify how we are paid is, I have to do it all the time. I'll tell someone, they say, well, how much money does a journeyman make? And you might go, I'll just use easy numbers. You might say, well, they make $32 an hour. They're like, great. But then I go, they also have, and this is, I'm a broad brush here, but we're going to talk about all the building trades, right? Pipe fitters, electricians, everybody, 2 types of retirement. And then both of those retirements, those contributions to those funds do not come out of that $32. They're on top of the $32. So not only then we have health and welfare, which is the health insurance. That doesn't come out of your pay either. So when a guy tells you that he's in the trades and he's making $32 an hour, that's on the check. His benefit structure is not like everybody else out there, where you get paid you get paid a certain amount of money, and then all the benefits are taken out of it. No, you get paid a certain amount and the benefits are on top of the check. I have to explain this over and over and over again to people because they can't fully, grasp the way that's structured, but it's a nice structure. And the last point that you made a comment about, when you were holding up your arm, one of the more, what I would say, are serious talking points that needs to be outright challenged and dismissed is that young people don't need insurance. All you need is catastrophic insurance, and that's it. And I hear people say this, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, why would you tell people this? Do you know what we do for a living? Do you know how dangerous it is? And you made it. You made the point. If I didn't have health insurance, this would have been a nightmare. And here's the thing. You could go on a job site today and tomorrow, and I'm not, I won't say you, I'll say me. I could go on a job site, so I'm not jinxing you, right? And I don't believe it anyway, but I could go on a job site tomorrow. I'm doing everything within my power, and everybody in my craft is doing everything within their power to make sure that we are safe and on the job, and somebody out of left field could do something. And now I need to go to the hospital, or now I need to go to urgent care or whatever. And it is what it is. The job is inherently unsafe to a certain degree. Now, we take steps, obviously, to mitigate that, right? Through, engineering controls and work practice controls and PPE and the like, SOPs, all that stuff. But better to have insurance and not need it than to need it and not have it. And this talking point that young people don't need insurance, it just needs to die 1,000 deaths. There is so much out there today that just can come out of nowhere. And so I'm glad you touched on that as well, because that's a talking point that needs to be made. There's so many young people who think, well, I'm young and I'm indestructible, right? And I'm going to live forever and I want all my money in my pocket. And I'm like, no, you don't. And this is especially like once you start having people who are dependent on you, your kids and a spouse or whatever, now you're being irresponsible by not providing that for them. And so it's just a talking point that it needs to go away. But I'm glad you brought it up, because it does need to be discussed, a lot, because it's one of those talking points that just seems so prevalent. Just comes out of nowhere. Oh, you're young, you're healthy, you don't need insurance. I'm like, no, listen, don't talk to that person. They're just telling you that because they don't want to pay that. They want to give you money in the pocket. And then you talk to people who are 10 years into whatever career field they've chosen, and they've got nothing to show for it because they just piss their money away. And they may have medical debt, right? 2/3 of all the bankruptcies in this country are due to medical debt. And 2/3 of those bankruptcies, people actually had health insurance. So it matters significantly. And for those of you young people who are listening, take it from us. I'm telling you right now, I'm middle-aged, and my man Sammy here he's still young, but I'm telling you, you need insurance. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I appreciate that. All right, last question, and we're going to wrap this up. If you had something to tell the young people, because, they might be more inclined to listen to you than me, what would it be?
It would be there's a few things. So the first one is, if you're not in the trades and you're curious about it, go ask. Like go ask your friends that are in it. Go ask your friends their experience. Go look up the local union hall in your area, and whatever trade. It doesn't have to be ironworkers. It can be electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, whoever. And some people would say call. I would say walk into that office, introduce yourself, and ask for ask for some information. Yeah. It's real easy to call and talk to somebody over the phone, but nobody can really put a face to the name. And you're just another phone call at that point. You're just someone that's calling. If you show up, it just shows that you're actually interested. No one's going to go and take the time out of their day to walk into a building and meet these people if they're not interested. Unless, someone has a gun to your head, but, probably not. So, be a person, show your face, go in there and, just ask questions. That's how I got into it. I walked in, introduced myself. I walked out with a job. It was that simple. And everybody's experience may be different, but that was mine. So I'm just going to stick with what I know. And that's, take initiative. I would say after that, don't be scared to just jump in. Don't be scared to take a chance and, hope that things will. I say this because like I said, I used to be very negative, and old me would have thought, oh, if I do this, it's just not going to work out. What's the point of starting all this if it's not going to work out? There's no point. I'm not built for this. I've never done this in my entire life. Like I said, I changed my perspective on things, and I just dove straight in. Mm-hmm. And it's probably been the best decision I've made in my young adult life. It's been good. And once you dive in and once you show initiative, continue to show up. Continue to, bust your ass. Just continue to bust your ass. Continue to show that you want it, because you can't learn anything if you don't show up.
Yeah.
You can read books, you can watch YouTube videos, you can go on TikTok, and you can look at all these guys with their GoPros on and stuff like that. It looks real cool. But you won't learn anything until you actually do it. You won't learn anything until you see the guys that have been doing it for so long actually put it into practice. And, say you are working and you're screwing everything up, or you screw up where you put this bar, or you rigged that piece of steel up wrong or something like that. You're not going to learn that you did that wrong unless someone comes and kind of corrects you. And, all that kind of snowballs to the point where you just start to get it. And, like I said, I'm only a beginning second year apprentice. So I only have a year under my belt, but I wouldn't know the things that I know now if I didn't show up. It's just as simple as that. And, if you don't show up, no contractor's really going to want you. There's you as a journeyman, you can kind of, I guess, have more liberty to do whatever you want. But as an apprentice, as someone who's just starting out, you just got to show up. Show up every day, try your hardest, and just, stay safe. Kind of be your brother's keeper in a way. Keep yourself safe, keep other people around you safe. Everyone wants to go home. What's the point of all this money that we're making if we're not going to be alive to spend it? Like you gotta be safe. You gotta be smart. But I would say just, my main piece of advice is showing up and applying yourself, because that will snowball into, journeyman, foreman, take an interest in you and your education and you as a tradesman. And, the things you learn are endless. You can make a whole career out of just rebar, out of structural, out of industrial. And, the more willing you are to actually want it, I think the further you'll go.
Yeah. Sound advice. Punctuality matters. You're building a reputation, and your reputation, it'll follow you, of course, but it'll also precede you. You need a job. I mean, it's better to have contractors who want you to come work for them than to be, that guy there, man, I'm not entirely sure about him. So wise advice. So, all right. Well, for the second time, I appreciate, your willingness to come on and, tell your story. And then, of course, when it's all done, I'll probably get it out either this week or next. And then, share it out. Tell other apprentices they want to come on. I'm more than willing to have, the best problem I could have is have a calendar that is completely booked. Like I cannot fit any more in because I have too many who are beating me down, wanting to be on. That's fine. That's great. I'll have conversations 3 times a week if that's what needs to happen to change some things and to generate interest in the trade and grow some things. It's more than willing to have. So thanks, brother. I really appreciate your time today and telling the story and your local and the trade in general. They've got some good stuff ahead of them for you. I can guarantee you that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm impressed, man. Your perspective is wise, is wisdom beyond your years. So just stay humble, keep learning, and maybe we'll have another podcast episode in a couple of years to see how much you've learned and gleaned from a lot of people, and the trade itself, and see where things are going from here. So appreciate it, Samuel.
Yeah, no problem.